Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. This time, we're tackling questions.
Questions.
The power of asking them, right. And we've got a great source for this.
Okay.
Chapter 6 from this book, Choices, Interviewing and Counseling Skills for Canadians.
Interesting.
But honestly, it's useful even if you're not a counselor.
Oh, for sure.
It's about understanding people better in any kind of conversation.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Right away. This chapter, it makes asking questions seem like a real skill, a science almost.
Right. Not just chit-chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like you can unlock so much by getting the questions right.
Okay, so first thing they point out is just one part of this bigger idea, active listening.
Uh-huh. Got to have the whole package.
So what else is in there? With active listening, I mean...
Well, you got to be really paying attention to the person talking that's attending.
Right, focused.
Yeah. And then making sure you get what they mean. That's where paraphrasing comes in.
Summarizing, too, right.
Exactly. And then, this is important, silence.
Oh, interesting.
Letting people think, not jumping in right away.
Makes sense. And then there's empathy.
Yeah. Connecting with how they're feeling.
Not just their words.
Exactly.
So it's like creating a space where they feel heard, then the questions come in.
Right. The questions have more power that way.
So how do we make sure they're the right questions, though?
Well, the chapter lays out 3 main goals for us.
Okay.
First, you want to figure out the focus. Are we solving a problem here? Or are we exploring someone's thoughts, feelings, goals?
I see. That sets you up.
Uh-huh. Then second, you want to get them thinking.
Okay.
Like really thinking, maybe seeing things in a new light.
Prompting them somehow.
Yeah. And then the third goal, this is important, how you order those questions.
The sequence.
So
Yeah.
it helps you actually analyze the situation.
This is where it gets really cool, I think. The chapter dives into the types of questions.
Ooh, yeah.
Open, closed, and indirect.
It's like having the right tool for the job.
Exactly. Open questions. Those are like your wide lens.
Ooh, I like that.
They give people room to answer big, share freely, starting with what or how.
Right. The speaker's in control there.
But could be too much for some folks.
That's true. They could take a while to answer, too.
So if opens wide are closed questions like a zoom lens.
Precisely. You zero in on specific facts, get your yes or no answers.
I see. Those would start with
Can, will, do, all those.
makes sense. So they're good for keeping the pace.
And easy to answer, so less pressure.
But I guess you wouldn't want to overuse them.
No, it could feel like an interrogation.
Right, or you miss out on those deeper answers.
Exactly.
Now, indirect questions, those seem a bit more subtle.
Oh, definitely. It's like you're gently steering the conversation.
Okay.
You might say, I'm curious about, or I wonder if...
Like an invitation to share.
Yeah. But trickier to get right. Takes practice.
And they might not answer directly.
True.
So once you've got those types down, the chapter gets into specific techniques.
Uh-huh. Getting more tactical now?
It starts with, they call them simple encouragers and directives.
Like what?
Things like, go on, tell me more, even just nodding.
Oh, wow. I do those all the time.
But they are techniques, showing you're listening.
It's true. Powerful little signals.
Then they talk about there are 5 main reasons to ask questions.
5. Okay, lay 'em on me.
Defining your purpose, defining roles, exploring and understanding, problem solving, and then evaluating.
Wow, it's like a whole system.
And running through all of those, this idea of getting to concreteness,
Meaning?
asking for specifics, examples, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Oh, so you really understand each other.
And speaking of examples, the chapter gives us some sample questions even.
Oh, perfect. Like what?
Well, to define the purpose, they say things like, what brings you here today?
Makes sense.
Or what do you expect from me?
Getting right to it.
And to understand the situation, they suggest asking, what do I need to know about this?
Oh, that's a good one.
Or even what you mean by when something's unclear.
Clarification, yeah.
Then, for evaluation, they say things like, what did we accomplish?
I see. Looking back.
Or,
what did we miss?
so it's not just about starting the conversation?
No, it's throughout the whole thing.
This is fascinating. But what about those times when someone just doesn't answer a question?
Ooh, yeah, that awkward silence.
It happens to everyone.
The chapter talks about that too.
Okay, good.
They give reasons why it might happen. Maybe the person didn't understand the question.
Right, or maybe it wasn't clear why you asked it.
Exactly. Or maybe they just don't know the answer.
That's fair enough.
We forget that sometimes.
We do. And it could be deeper stuff, too, like they're worried about privacy.
Or there are issues they haven't dealt with.
Or maybe it's just, the relationship dynamic.
So not always a bad thing.
No, just means we got to adjust.
What are some alternatives to asking directly then?
Well, they suggest self-disclosure, sharing a bit about yourself to connect,
Oh, I liked it.
or using those directives we talked about, like,
Yeah.
tell me more. Right, right. Or even just those simple encouragers. Uh-huh. Mm.
And let's not forget, body language is huge.
Ah, picking up on those cues.
Sometimes that says more than words ever could.
Man, this is really making me think about how I have conversations.
Me too.
Feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
I know, right? There's so much more to unpack with this whole question thing.
So much. I'm already starting to see how powerful this can be, not just for interviews.
Absolutely. Like you said at the beginning, this is for any conversation.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What else does this chapter have in store for us?
Well, we've got to dive into these questioning pitfalls they talk about.
Oh, yeah, those traps we fall into without realizing it.
Exactly. And then there's this whole section on interview transitions.
Transitions, interesting, like moving from one topic to another smoothly.
You got it. Plus, they talk about some special considerations when you're talking to different groups of people.
Like what?
Young people, seniors, folks who might need a different approach.
Okay, that sounds super relevant. I'm ready to keep going.
Me too. Let's dive back in. It really hits you how much this stuff applies to, like, just everyday life.
Oh, totally.
Not just for counselors or anything.
Right. It's like a communication upgrade for everybody.
Exactly. And, one of the cool things, when you get good at asking questions, it's like you can move past that surface level chit-chat.
Oh, you mean get into the real stuff?
Yeah, have those deeper conversations.
It makes me think about those questioning pitfalls we talked about earlier. I can't believe how often I fall into those traps.
Oh, tell me about it. Like leading questions, right?
Ugh. Yes. I'm totally guilty of subtly pushing the conversation where I want it to go.
It's so easy to do, but it can really shut down the other person.
And we don't even realize we're doing it half the time.
Right. And then there's asking too many questions at once.
Oh, man, that's a big one for me.
It's like bam, bam, bam. No time to breathe.
I know. It's like we're so scared of silence, we just gotta fill it up.
But silence is good. It lets things sink in.
True. And sometimes, the most interesting stuff comes out in those quiet moments.
Absolutely. And then, oh my gosh, asking 5 questions in a row.
Oh, yeah, that's the worst.
Talk about overwhelming.
It's like, pick one.
Seriously. And then, you know what I'm realizing? I ask irrelevant questions all the time.
Oh, me too.
Probably just out of nerves or trying to keep things going.
Yeah, but we gotta stay focused. Make each question count.
Each one should have a purpose.
And speaking of purpose, what about those poorly timed questions? Like, can you imagine dropping a bomb on someone when they're sharing something super personal?
Ugh, the worst. Sensitivity is key.
Timing is everything. And finally, there's the classic overuse of why questions.
Ah, yes. We ask why all the time as kids, but as adults, it can feel kind of,
Judgy.
like you're putting someone on the spot.
Even if we don't mean it that way.
Exactly. The authors say, try to understand without making people feel like they're under a microscope.
Okay, I'm taking notes. So many bad habits to break.
But hey, now we know, right? I
Yeah.
can do better.
It's like we've got this whole new set of communication skills.
And you can use them anywhere, work, family, even just chatting with friends.
It's like a roadmap to better conversations.
Speaking of roadmaps, let's shift gears a bit and talk about those interview transitions the chapter talks about.
Transitions, okay.
They're helpful in any conversation, not just interviews. It's about moving smoothly between topics.
So it doesn't feel all jumpy and awkward,
Right. So first, you've got your natural transitions where the conversation just flows.
like organically.
Yeah. And then you have strategic transitions where you're guiding things a bit more purposefully.
Okay, so you're steering.
Like speaking of X, that reminds me of Y.
Okay, got it. So what about those times when someone goes totally off track? Is that where control transitions come in?
You got it. Is how you manage those interruptions or bring things back on topic.
Right. Like, okay, interesting, but let's get back to.
Exactly. And then there are phase transitions, which signal bigger shifts in the conversation.
So like moving from talking about the problem to brainstorming solutions.
Exactly. And finally, you have connect or linking transitions.
Okay, what are those for?
They tie different parts of the conversation together, make sure everything feels connected and purposeful.
It's like a dance. Knowing when to lead, when to follow.
I love that analogy. And like with dancing, practice makes perfect.
The more we pay attention to these transitions, the smoother our conversations become.
Another thing that really stood out to me in the chapter was how they emphasize the importance of being sensitive to different groups of people.
Oh, yeah, they talked about young people and seniors specifically, right?
Yeah. It's a reminder that communication isn't one size fits all. Like with young people, you have to avoid power struggles, make sure they feel safe and respected.
It's a whole different world for them these days.
Right. And we also have to be aware of any trauma they might have experienced.
And the impact of social media.
Absolutely. It's a lot to consider.
So what about when we're talking to seniors? What are some things to keep in mind?
Well, with seniors, the big thing is remembering that everyone is an individual.
Right, they're not all the same.
They have different abilities, different health concerns, different cultural backgrounds, different experiences.
So we need to be flexible and adaptable.
Exactly. And just like with young people, it's important to empower them, make sure they feel heard and respected.
We can learn so much from their wisdom and life experience.
It's about valuing their perspective.
I love how these sections really highlight the importance of empathy.
It's not just about the words we use, but how we approach the conversation.
Taking into account who we're talking to.
Recognizing that good communication is a two-way street.
We have to be good listeners and skillful guides.
This is really making me think about how I can be more intentional in my interactions.
Me too. Not just with young people and seniors, but with everyone.
That's what's so cool about this chapter. It gives you a whole new way of thinking about communication.
More awareness, more empathy.
And more skill.
Wow, this deep dive has been packed with insights. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of how powerful questions can be.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore here.
Do we have time to get into some of the more nuanced aspects of how questions can really transform our conversations?
Yeah, there's definitely more. One thing that's sticking with me is how questions, they're not just about getting info.
Right.
It's like they build relationships, too.
Oh, absolutely. When someone's asking you stuff, really wanting to know what you think.
It makes you feel seen.
Totally. Like they value your perspective, you know?
It's like saying, hey, come into my world for a bit.
And that opens up so much.
The chapter talks about self-awareness, too, with questions.
Oh,
It's not just the technique.
No, it's knowing why you're asking.
Like, what are your biases going in?
Because we all have them.
If you're not aware of that, you might just be looking for answers you already believe.
Exactly. Confirming what you already think.
Instead of actually learning something new.
Gotta come in with curiosity and open mind, knowing you don't have it all figured out.
And that's when things get exciting.
Because then the right questions, they lead to
Summer perspectives, new solutions, stuff you'd never think of on your own.
every conversation becomes a learning experience.
If you're open to it.
I love that. And the cool thing is, anyone can do this.
Exactly. Doesn't matter what your job is or how old you are.
It's about paying attention, practicing these skills.
It's like a superpower, honestly.
So for our listener, what's the big takeaway here? What do we want them to remember from this whole deep dive into questions?
That this is a superpower everyone has. Asking good questions.
They can unlock so much.
Deeper understanding, better relationships, even just personal growth.
It's realizing the power of the questions we ask.
Before we go, I want to leave everyone with a little challenge.
Ooh, I like challenges.
Pay attention to the questions you ask today, both to yourself and others.
Okay.
Are they open, closed, indirect? See how those questions shape the whole conversation, the whole relationship.
That's a great challenge. It's like an invitation to be more mindful.
Exactly. Because the questions we ask, they have a ripple effect.
They really do. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
And until next time, keep asking those great questions.